Good evening, and welcome to Get the Picture with Bianca Bosker, Julie Curtis, and Robert Dimin, moderated by Benjamin Lorr. We're delighted to have all of you joining us tonight at the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library. My name is Tim Smith, and I'm a senior librarian at SNFL and your host for this evening. Before I introduce tonight's speakers, I would like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for making programs like this possible. I would also like to remind you that if you don't already have a library card, it is easy to get one by visiting any desk in the building. Finally, I would like to encourage you to visit NYPL's website and take a look at the upcoming 7 Stories Up programs. We have an excellent lineup this season, including programs featuring new fiction and non-fiction, live music, and more. We would love to have you join us in this space again. It's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers. Bianca Bosker is an award-winning journalist and the New York Times best-selling author of Cork Dork, a wine-fueled adventure among the obsessive sommeliers, big bottle hunters, and rogue scientists who taught me to live for taste, which has been praised as the kitchen confidential of wine. In addition to serving as a contributing writer at The Atlantic, Bosker has written for publications such as The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, Food and Wine, The Guardian, and The New Republic. Her writing has been anthologized in the Best American Travel Writing and recognized with awards from the International Association of Culinary Professionals, the Society of Professional Journalists, the Society of American Business Editors and Writers, the Association of Food Journalists, and the MFK Fisher Awards, as well as shortlisted for the Gerald Loeb Awards, the William Saroyan International Prize for Writing, the Deadline Club Awards, among others. Julie Curtis was born in 1982 in Paris, France, and lives and works in Brooklyn, New York. She studied at the École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts, Paris, graduating in 2006 with a BA and an MFA. Curtis's solo exhibitions include White Cube Mason's Yard, London, Anton Kern Gallery, New York, various Small Fires, Los Angeles, and 106 Green, Brooklyn. Group exhibitions include Liam Museum of Art Seoul, The Shed, New York, Nassau County Museum of Art, New York, and White Cube, Bermondsey, London. She's been the recipient of a number of fellowships and awards, including Yokobo Art Space Returnee Residency Program, Tokyo, Fellow of the Sharp Walenta Studio Program, New York, and Salt on Stall Arts Colony Residency, New York. Curtis's work is represented in a number of museum collections, among which are the Bronx Museum, Columbus Museum of Art, Ohio, High Museum, Atlanta, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Mackey Collection, Japan, Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago, and Hughes Museum, Shanghai. Robert Dimin was born in 1980 and currently lives in Ridgewood, Queens. He studied art history, fine art, and poetry at the New School and has an MFA from the University of Pennsylvania. Before launching Dimin, a Tribeca-based contemporary art gallery in 2023, Robert worked for over 15 years throughout the art industry, starting out as an artist, working for a year at Creative Time, and eventually finding a home in the gallery world. Exhibitions Dimin has organized have been featured in publications like The New York Times, The New Yorker, The Wall Street Journal, and Interview magazine. He's helped place artworks in museums around the US and abroad, including LACMA, the Perez, and the Parish. Benjamin Lorr is the author of The Secret Life of Groceries, The Dark Miracle of the American Supermarket, and Hellbent, a critically acclaimed exploration of the Bikram yoga community. Lorr is a graduate of Montgomery County Public Schools and Columbia University. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome tonight's guests.
Thank you all so much for coming. This is so fun. I'm excited.
Yes, no, this definitely highlights. It's really exciting to be up here with you guys. Bianca, just first kick this off with just a question to kind of ground us here. Your first book was on wine, a world notorious for snooty people, elitism, strong opinions, and really forbidding walls for us normies. And then you decided on the art world. So different. So what led you from there to here? Can you tell us why the art world, what attracted to you it? Kind of both as just a writer, investigator, and as a human.
Yeah. So Wow. Okay, jumping right in. I would say that. Well, I would say first of all, like I am someone who is obsessed with obsession, and I think one through line through both of these worlds that really drew me in was the outsized, absolutely magnetic passion of the people inside them. And I think what was particularly compelling to me was this disconnect between this, kind of mania they felt for these different kind of topics, be it like wine or art, and my own like absolutely puny inability to comprehend why these things matter. I think for me, what for both of these projects, they are not just journalistic. I mean, they took over my life. They became, these years-long journeys where I really abandoned my normal life to go and work in these industries. And so I think that what tipped them from being just a point of curiosity into something that became deeply personal was this feeling that the people in this world, they basically shook something loose into me, which made me think that I was getting life all wrong. Like I had drastically misunderstood something about what it meant to be a human being in the world. And if I step back a little bit more, as I've since Get the Picture came out in February and I've been thinking about it, I realized that, both these projects, if I'm being honest, emerged out of a fear of death. I think that on the surface, Cork Dork is a book about wine, but it's really about these forgotten senses of taste and smell. It's about living more sensefully. And I think Get the Picture is nominally about art, but to me it's like part user guide to the hidden logic of the art world, and it's part quest to learn how to live life more expansively. And what was so compelling to me about people I met, like Julie and like Rob, was the way that, first of all, I'd never met a group of people willing to sacrifice so much for something, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, of so little obvious practical value. Like turning their lives upside down. I mean, Julie is the sort of person who treats a 100-year-old painting like it's as necessary as a liver, And I didn't understand why. Like, what could art do for us? Like, why bother with it? And I think, you both have this way of sort of, it's like you've accessed this trapdoor in your brains, and it's like, it made my life feel very claustrophobic by comparison. So I think that the book is also, about how do we live life more expansively? How do we experience more? How do we see more? And so I think it's a fear of death in the sense that it's like, how do we do more with the limited number of hours that we're given on this planet? And so for me, wine and now art were really a way into trying to just make the most of the minutes that we're given.
Yes. And so that's how you got to this book. But tell me a little bit how you got to Rob and Julia.
Yeah.
Like, why them, and how do they fit into your story?
Yeah. So I'm curious whether our meet cute story will be similar or not. Their telling of it, but I started this. So art had been a real passion of mine growing up. Like I painted very seriously through high school, and I never studied art history, but I kind of put away that art side of me. And when I moved to New York, this sort of like adult Bianca grabbed the wheel, and I reassured myself that if I wasn't going to be making art, at least I would be seeing it on a regular basis. And that plan for me lasted basically until I tried to go see art, and I just felt so out of my league. And bit by bit, art and I really fell out of touch. I just felt like I didn't know how to do it. I didn't belong. I would go to galleries and museums and feel like I was at least 2 tattoos and a master's degree away from figuring out what the hell was going on. And I took the coward's way out. And it wasn't until a few years back that I really began to have this sneaking fear that I was missing out on something really big. And so I decided to try reconnecting. And there was that obsession that really drew me in. There was also a lot of artists who pitied me. I met them and they were like, you're missing visual literacy. And they diagnosed, in their telling of it, this was absolutely dangerous in a world so saturated with images. And that made me wonder if I could see art, but if I could see the world the way they did. And so that was this curiosity to begin trying having conversations with people in the art world. I started, talking to anyone that I could get a hold of, friends of friends, random people I looked up on the internet. I just tried to sit down with people and sort of ask them, why does art matter? What is this passion? These were to me pretty innocent, Sesame Street level questions, how do you do art? And I was really shocked, and maybe you could say I'm naive if you spent time in the art world, that no one wanted to talk to me. Like, I got warnings, threats. A collector was like, I sort of told him my whole plan. I was like, I want to go in the artist, I figure out what's going on. And he basically was like, this is a terrible idea if you want to keep living in New York City. He basically intimated that, like, I might need to go into some sort of a witness protection program. And even once I finally start to crack the door, like, it was not, I got a lot of unsolicited feedback on the way I dressed, the way I carried myself. And I think that those were valuable experiences. I will say that secrecy, just, word to the wise, like, nothing gets a journalist's interest like refusing to talk. Obviously at that point I was like, well, what is going on? Like, I thought that art was sort of for everyone. Like, why don't you want to talk about it with us? And I think what jumped out to me about Julie and Rob was I met them at a point where I think I was feeling like maybe there'd never be a place for me in the art world, where I was really running into a lot of closed doors, and they were so different. I think Rob in particular, I remember the first time you met, you were like, this industry needs to open up to survive. You're like, we want to see people love art. And then Julie is, I think of, Get the Picture is critical in some ways about the art world, but I also think of it as ultimately a love story, right? It is a celebration of art and its place in our lives. And if there is, Julie, I hope this isn't like, putting on the spot, but if there's someone that I fell in love with in this book, it was Julie. And Julie has changed my life. I think anyone who spends time with her knows that, like, her way of seeing the world, her way of seeing art is so fresh and inspiring and interesting and dynamic. And so, perhaps to her chagrin, I don't know, but I sort of met her, and as she will probably attest, kind of didn't let her go. We did a studio visit, and one artist mentioned her name to me. It's how a lot of people find artists in the art world, just like an artist mentions someone that they admire. We did a studio visit, and then I just kept showing back up.
So, Julie, now that Bianca has expressed her love for you, I don't want that to influence your answer here, but I am curious what it was like when Bianca knocked on your door. And, like, what went through your head? We just heard about this paranoid secrecy in the art world. Was there some, how did you deal with that entree?
I don't think I knew exactly what I was getting into, like you said. Well, I mean, I just, like a lot of things in life, I kind of welcomed them, and I was really curious about what you wanted to do. I think I kept scratching my head. Like, I think we kept meeting, and I kept being like, but what is your book really about? Like, I just didn't get it. And you were saying something so, like, broad. Like, I want to know what art does for people. And I was like, yeah, that's very, really, what is the book going to be about? Because people in general, especially journalists, when they approach us, they always want, like, it's always about the market, about the money, about a lot of things like that. So I was appreciative that you didn't seem that concerned or interested about that aspect of things. But I think until the very last minute, I had no idea what you were going to, I just knew you had a lot of experiences, but I was clueless. I was like, how is she going to frame all the things we've done together, and then the different lives she had in the art world. So yeah, I was open to the experience. I enjoyed you as a person. I thought you were super, like, cool and fun, and I really liked your book. I think I read your book, obviously, and I was like, yeah, I like what she does, and if she does the same thing with the art world, it's going to make a really entertaining book. Yeah.
Okay. And Rob, so you have a mission it sounds like you're trying to take art into the public sphere. What was it like working with Bianca, or having Bianca?
And I should say, for context, if you haven't read the book, so, I ended up throwing myself in. I mean, I believe in learning by doing. And so I, like a lot of journalists, I do interviews, I read research reports, but I also wanted to go and, like I said, work in the art world. I believe that the way to get honest answers to the fundamental questions at the core of our relationship with art was to get into the middle of the action. And so I ended up, working in artist studios like Julie's. I ended up, selling if I may say so, thousands of dollars worth of art, at galleries, and I worked for Rob. I was a security guard at the Guggenheim, so if there was a period of time where if you tried to take a photo with flash, I definitely told you not to. So I immersed myself. Just to say that was ultimately like the relationship that we had, where I would show up to Julia's studio and do everything from answer emails to, paint white canvases white. Yeah.
What was the question again?
Well, what's it like when this super sincere, obsessive about obsessive shows up at your door and says, "Hey, I want to learn everything about your approach to this." What went through your head there?
So I first read Bianca's book, the wine book, and I thought it was spectacular. And I saw an artist coming to me, not a painter, but an artist coming to me and saying, "Hey, I want to make this project. Can you help me?" And I saw that she was a little lost. I saw the frustration that she was feeling about the kind of barriers to entry. And I really naively or whatever, I don't know, believe that a lot of what we do should be accessible. I believe in art, that it has a function that is kind of beyond its, primary function that most people believe it to be, and that one of the most frightening things is how we don't allow people to really participate in it. And so when Bianca approached me, and I was like, let's go for it. And I also am a firm believer that you only learn by doing. And so it was kind of it was a no-brainer to me meeting another human being that had this kind of I'm going to figure it out myself. You're not going to tell me. I'm going to tell you after I participated in it. And so it was really kind of I feel you could do this. You're a smart, articulate person. You have good style, even though some people might not have thought that. You were very wonderful public-facing with people, articulate and just really sincerely engaged. And so it felt right. And she was going to sink or shine with the ship, with us. We were new-ish. I mean, we were 6 years, I guess, at that point, but it was really kind of a make or break moment. And I felt it was one of these, I guess it's kismet. It was one of these moments that it was something came when we needed it. And I think something came when she needed it. And it was funny because I didn't realize that she was also working with Julie. Julie and I run in the same social circles and were heavily at that time. And I must have been at a Thanksgiving or something like that where we realized what was going on. And I think we were all in the same place where we didn't know what the hell Bianca was going to write until we read it. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's spectacular and approachable. And
was there discomfort there in the not knowing?
Oh, I mean,
I love that this has turned into a performance review. This is this is totally fair. I mean, I wrote a lot about you guys, so it's really a long time
we gotta
coming.
hear from the other side.
yeah. I'm sorry.
Well, we were definitely a bit nervous,
Yeah.
but it was also exciting because you're pretty secretive, You're pretty you keep it pretty, but I think that was, I don't know, it was kind of a no-brainer to me because we read the previous book, so I guess I totally trusted, the previous book and the work you had done. It was obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, if I came off as terrible, it was who I was at the time. She, she's really tremendous. Sorry again with the performance review stuff, but the way that she is able to kind of articulate who people are through language is really spectacular.
Yeah,
I guess
there's
we
no
weren't
finer praise, I will say, than that comment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
It wasn't really you we were nervous about. It was actually maybe more us, how we came off.
All right, so a lot of grounding, a lot of process. I want to kind of shift into the art itself, since we have, we're so lucky to have you guys on this panel. So for me, a real highlight of the book and an actual light bulb moment is when Bianca starts explaining how she considers an artist's decision when viewing art. And I guess at that point, I am total normie when it comes to art and had always expected that was the painting's job, that viewing art was kind of a passive experience, and I'd look at a painting and it was supposed to do something for me. And the idea of an interrogative viewing was new, and it really changed how I looked at art. But all three of you guys are, in this particular you two, bring very discrete lenses to the viewing of art. So I guess, Julie, how do you hope people are going to go and, like, in the actual act of staring at your paintings, like, how do you hope people will view them? And then how do you go when you go out to gallery openings, museums? How do you view art yourself?
The first question is hard. Like, I don't know. How do I hope? Yeah, I hope it does the same thing that it does to me, that someone is compelled for a reason or another to stare at my artwork for, more than 5 seconds before, all I want is a little bit of time, I think, I think if every artist wishes for a little bit of time. And the rest is really up to them, because I'm not interested in imposing any kind of particular meaning. I really like to keep things a little open so everybody can, kind of project. And it's funny because that's the case. Most of the time people come to me and they have really interesting takes or things I didn't expect are catching their attention. Sometimes very weird, like, interpretations that I'm like, whoa, I guess. Yeah, that would be my answer for the first question. But, like, the second is, every time I go to the museum, I'm hoping that there'll be a little spark that will create in me. Like, so I go back to my studio, and then I'm like, this little spark kind of made me see something different, and I'm coming back and I'm fueling that back into my work. And I get that excitement to keep the things going, And I think it's the same. It's not just like artwork, like, painting or like museum artwork, but also I expect the same thing from movies or from music. Is that one moment, like, your day is not spoiled if you have that one moment that you suddenly. I guess it's about being in the moment, right? Suddenly you were in the moment and time stopped and nothing else mattered, and you had that special moment. Doesn't matter if it's a second or like 10 minutes.
Amazing. Is there anything you do to get yourself in a place where you can, when you walk into a place where you can be in the moment?
No.
Okay. You just carry it with you.
No, no, I mean, what kind of preparation, it's no.
This is a normie and me just asking. But Rob, you bring a very different lens, I imagine, as a gallery owner, or maybe it's similar, but I guess maybe when you're sizing up a piece of art and thinking about it, like, what's going through your brain, like, both, I guess, as a person appreciating art, but also as a gallery owner who's...
So I think it really depends upon context, and I know you might bring this up later, but depends upon how I'm a viewer. We hear this term that art is subjective. That's something that we hear a lot, and I think there's a misunderstanding of what that means. I think that it is, we are the subject of all art, right? Like, when we're in it, it's like the subjectivity is our life experience and what we place into it. And so for me, I have to figure out what my role is in that viewership, right? Like, am I professional Rob, like, looking to understand, am I going to work with this artist? Is this something that I believe I can advocate for, I could help?
Sell.
Yes. I mean, advocate for. Sell. That's fair. Language. Thank you. Or is it something that I am, like, looking at for pleasurable, like, viewership, or am I going into a space as an educator and someone to have a conversation with? So it's tough. Like, when it becomes the most challenging is when I'm invited to meet with graduate students at school, because they want to talk with me about selling.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk with them about selling. I want to talk with them about their practice and what art is to them, because art exists, and this is something that you do, I think, articulate pretty well in the book. art exists outside of the market. The market is only one very small portion of it that here in New York City we focus on. But oftentimes when I go to universities, I look at students and I tell them, like, hey, like, don't think about the market. You know, it's not stay pure with your art, but like sometimes you have to make sacrifices in order to participate in a market that are not authentic to your art practice. I think that if you have that spark, which I think is something, and I can't speak for Julie, but when Julie made the decision to move to New York City and participate in the market, she was aware that she was going to be able to continue her intellectual agency of making and not have it be compromised by the market. And I think that that is something that can be hugely successful for some artists, but could also be really challenging for others because their integrity and their messaging and their ideas and ideology gets lost because of a market. And so it's tough, but you know, but for me also, I look for the spark, you know, like, but that'll happen in like stuff that I can't sell, you know, like it'll be like, wow, this, you know, piece of string from 1970 is really badass. Like, how did this like, you know, make space feel the way that it feels, you know?
Right. And so Bianca, and in the book, Bianca has these amazing scenes where she's at Art Basel, Miami, or at spring/break, and you're like immersed in this like frenetic place where lots of people are looking at lots of art and making lots of decisions. So like, how do those like, how's that jive with some of like the art buyers that you observed while writing?
Well, I think, you know, I think for me, like the two questions that were really guiding my journey were, and as frustrating and broad as they may have sounded to Julie, hopefully they make more sense now that you've read the book, but you know, like it was really, why does art matter and how do any of us engage with it more deeply? And, you know, I think that for me, one of my goals throughout was to develop an eye, right? And for people in the art world, like, you know, an eye is not just an organ, it is this painstakingly developed outlook that enables you to see so much that doesn't meet the eye. Like, who will be the next Picasso? Or like, what is transcendent about a piece of string from the 1970s? And so that for me was also kind of what was guiding me. Like, I really wanted to understand, like, how do I maybe like some of you have had that experience so often of like walking into one of these bright white, intensely lit rooms and like turning a corner to see a bunch of people, you know, very seriously in hushed tones, contemplating a sculpture of decaying vegetables on a limp, you know, on a stained mattress. And I was like, you know, where's the candid camera? You know, like the joke's on me. I don't get it, you know, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't like that feeling. And I think that, you know, when I started, my first sort of foray into the art world was frustrating when it came to developing my eye, because I did feel like so many of the art connoisseurs that I was meeting, and this was before meeting Rob and Julie, they spent to me surprisingly little time on the artwork itself. And instead they focused on the context around the work, sort of different from the context you're describing, but like sort of the web of names around the work. So they would look at a piece and, you know, ask questions like, where did the artists go to school? Who shows their work? Who owns their work? Who are they sleeping with right now? And that context seemed to shape people's judgment of the value of the work so much more than the piece itself. And I found that very frustrating because I felt like I was being encouraged to outsource my eye to the hive mind. It also felt like one more way to sort of keep out the rest of us, because these gatekeepers become so much more important if we're told that we need, like, you know, years of going to art fairs and advanced degrees and familiarities with the social mores of the art world to really commune with a painting. And I think that for me, you know, these breakthroughs in ways of seeing more concretely happened at different points, you know, working with you and Elizabeth at Denny Dimin Gallery. But I think for me, there was a real epiphany when I started working with Julie of just watching you work and watching other artists work. You know, Liz Ainsley, I think I saw Liz here tonight, but like, you know, watching artists in the studio, I think all of the kind of hushed murmuring about like art speak and historicity and postmodernism and, mark making that goes on in galleries didn't prepare me for the blistery business of actually making art. Like, making art is, to me, athletic. Like, it is, like, you're like losing, I lost patches of arm hair to a sculpture, you broke a sweat many times, like in the studio trying to get like the right color gray, right? And I think, at least that's how it appeared to me. And I think that watching artists work was, to me, a reminder or sort of a lesson in how to savor work, I think, more like an artist. And that meant focusing on the physical form. It meant spending time with the work, and it also meant paying attention to the decisions. There was something you said that I come back to all the time, which is, you said painting is constant decision making. And I think sometimes, there is this immaculate conception effect that happens when we go to galleries and museums where it's like, it just seems like it ended up there. It was just always meant to look like that. I'm so excited, I'm just throwing things. It's like it just happened, right? It just appeared, and it wasn't. Like, all of those were decisions by the artist. And I love looking at work with artists. Like, I remember going to see the Alex Katz show at the Guggenheim with you, or seeing the Dana Schutz show with Liz, and it's like those experiences were totally different from seeing art with curators or on my own, where it was all about like, oh my God, like, why that color? Why that brush stroke? Why like using wet over wet? And I think that, to me, there's the sort of answer to like, why does art matter and how do we engage with it more deeply? There's so many answers to that question. I try to do justice to them in the book. But to me, I think there's something very empowering about that idea of staying in the work, focusing on the artist's decision, spending more time with it, that lets you cut through the context and have your own relationship with the work. In some ways, all of the snobbery, there is a lot of snobbery, becomes less relevant when you can just have that relationship on your own.
Yes. And I guess I want to stick on that point of staying with it. Like, you talked about that, how to avoid falling into this hive mind, giving you the context or telling you what the context is for the art. And, you offer this remedy of like thinking about the decisions the artists are making. You just mentioned like staying with something over time and just sitting with it. So, and in the book you have this, it's like the average person at the Met walking by art spends 17 seconds with the art, and that includes reading the little description. So that's not a lot of time.
Right. Probably overestimates, because that only counts people that stopped at a particular work. So, but anyway. Sorry.
But what happens when you stay with a work for a longer period of time? Like, what opens up?
Well, I'm curious to know what you will say. But I think, in my opinion, so I had that experience because I worked as a security guard, and there were a number of different reasons why I decided to work as a security guard. But one of them was that I was interested in what would happen if I spent hours and hours with the same artwork with no possibility for escape. And there's this concept of slow looking, and I love that term. I think it is what it sounds like, and yet so few of us do it. And slow looking is not 17 seconds. You can maybe start with 5 minutes, but like work up to 15 and then 50 minutes. And I think I was really intrigued by guards because, to me, like, they spend more time around artworks than anybody, like more time than collectors, gallerists, even the artists themselves. I mean, some of the longest tenured employees at the museums in New York City are the security guards. Like, they have been there since the invention of disco. And yes, like, some of the collections change, but like, they have spent decades with some of these works. And I remember talking to a guard at the Whitney, and he was like, he had like introduced a curator to a facet of a painting. And I love the fact that they're also, they're not always bringing the same framework to their approach to art. I do think that when you read the wall text in a museum, it's written by an art historian, and so it necessarily brings an art historical perspective to it. And I think, I had this experience, of, at the beginning, like, the work of a guard was really freaking boring. Like, I used to go to the galleries and just pray for someone to try and touch something so I could tell them not to, And then bit by bit, like, we'd look at the same works hour after hour, day after day, week after week. And I developed these relationships with the paintings, the sculptures there. And I remember there was, and they would change. Like, I remember, like, I had this like tumultuous affair with the Francis Bacon painting, and like some days like I just all I wanted to do was be close to it, and like some days it was just too intense, like I couldn't get near it. But there was one Brancusi sculpture in particular, which was, I think, for me, really like the first time that I experienced what I can only describe as love for a hunk of marble. You know, it was that feeling that like I could be around it for as long as I could see into the future and not get sick of its company. And there was something magical that happened, not with every work, but I realized, you know, there was another artist who gave me this really just concrete advice when I'm confronted with an artwork to just notice 5 things, right? Challenge yourself to notice 5 things about the work. And they don't have to be grandiose. It's not like, you know, oh, this is a commentary on like femininity in the post-internet age. It could just be like, this green makes me want to lick it, or like, you know, they, you know, have a thumbprint on the left-hand corner. And so I would challenge myself on my shifts to notice 5 things about a work, and then 5 more, and then 5 more. And some pieces, you kind of hit a wall, and those are frustrating to be around. There's like particular galleries where I was like, oh my God, this is the longest 45 minutes of my life. But then there were others where every time I got there, I discovered something new, and so exciting. It was amazing. So challenge yourself. I am a big advocate for slow looking, and doing so not only at museums, but going and seeking out art in, you know, up and coming galleries. Like there's, I think, so much value in exposing and taking some adventures with our tastes and exposing ourselves to art that is less celebrated, less well known, but you know, but no less magical.
Amazing. But Julie, I'd want to go to you, like on this question of time. You spend tremendous amount of time with a piece when you're making it, and Bianca just spoke to the ways that these pieces offer a relationship, and they open and they deepen, and her perception of them changes. Is that operating when you're making the piece, 1? And 2, if it is operating when you're making the piece, how do you know as a creator when it's finished? If it's constantly changing.
Time. It's interesting because for still works, you know, it's like the notion of time is still super important.
Yeah.
Well, from the conception of a piece, first it starts a bit like, you know, it's by a sketch sometimes just an idea when I have a walk, and so it's a whole process from there to the finished thing. But I do a little sketch, and I change my little sketch, and then eventually I project that, and then and usually there's always a big difference from what I had in mind, and when I see it projected, I was missing something. You change the scale, then you try to find colors, and you know, there's a lot of discrepancy, and sometimes you think an idea is going to make a great painting, and it just doesn't happen. And sometimes the opposite, you think that's not going to be very exciting, and then it turns out to be the most exciting thing you're working on. Sometimes it's very quick, you know, that it's 1, 2, 3. You don't know why. It's just like it was a good idea. It just went easy. It was pleasurable to paint. And sometimes it's just so... It's like torture. I think you witnessed that. Yeah, you saw that in the studio. You just don't understand, and you're like, but yeah, like I came back from a month-long trip in France, and I came back to my studio today or yesterday, and I saw a painting. I thought it was finished, and I was like, nope, it's not finished. It's like, and how do you know if a painting is finished? Usually, it's as silly as an itch. It's you come back and it's. This painting is itching, you know, you need to like keep scratching at it. You need to keep working, and it's intuitive. I don't think there's something intellectual about it. It's just, you know it. You know when you put the final, no, you don't know when you put the final mark, but you just, again, you need time. Yeah. Even a month later, I know I needed that month long to know, okay, this is not finished.
When the itch is quieted down.
Yeah. And to come back to the idea of time too, it's like, yeah, it's important to do slow looking, but also some works will open up and some will not stand the test, and that's interesting. And also sometimes it's okay to do quick looking. Like I do that all the time. You go in a room, you're like, you scan, you know, like this is very rude, but you do this, and you're like, okay, I'm moving on.
In praise of the glance.
Yeah.
Rob, when I think of time with you, like how do you sit with a work or a body of work before committing to a relationship with the artist? Like, how does that work?
I'm committed before I'll know like early. And the way that I do it is I will identify artists I want to work with. We'll have meetings maybe 18 months before a show, and then the artist will conceive the show, and we'll just kind of continue that relationship. And something that Julie talked about is the way that artists fight with paintings, and it's something you, as a dealer, you have to get really patient if you trust the artist, and that's kind of been my thing. Like, it's kind of like, and over the years I've learned how to kind of articulate certain ideas to help the artist calm down, to let them realize that step away from the painting, go outside, look at nature, do something else, but your fears and what you're fighting is real. I also just kind of want to comment on something that they both kind of talked about. Real work like stays with you forever. Like, there are paintings at certain institutions that I'll visit when I'm in the neighborhood, like paintings that affected me from when I was like a 12-year-old or a 30-year-old or at different points in my life. Like, I can't go past the Met and not visit a particular painting, and I kind of have this weird relationship with the Met where I don't really ever want to go there because of a relationship I had with someone that worked there. And so it's that person's museum in my mind, but I still go and visit this particular painting. And it's because it just the work that matters to you stays with you, and it changes you, and it affects the way that you navigate the world and how you continue to look at things.
Amazing. Well, I want to switch gears from this like wholesome place of work that's speaking to you and changing you, and talk a little bit about some of the structural aspects of the art world and kind of the role of elitism and a lot of the barriers.
What are you talking about?
I've just heard tell. I heard tell that you were threatened while writing this book, and throughout the book there's this talk of normies and schmoes, and also the heads and tastemakers, and I think that when you were working in the Guggenheim, you kind of put you quoted Pierre Bourdieu, the French sociologist, who really kind of encapsulated the way that it was working. And I'll just read this.
It would not be a panel about art if we did not quote a French sociologist. Yeah.
So this is just technically fulfilling the duties of this panel. So the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, in his typical downer fashion, I'm quoting Bianca here, while she's working in the Guggenheim, contends that museums are still guilty of a, quote, false generosity. Though technically open to all, the tiniest details of the form betray their true function, which is to reinforce the feeling for some of belonging and the feeling of exclusion for other. So this kind of like juxtaposition of belonging and democratic art and also art that excludes is a big tension that runs through the book. It runs through your experiences with people. It runs... So yeah, I guess for each of you, what is the role of elitism in the art world? How important is it to creating taste? When Bianca was talking about having an eye, how important is having some kind of cultural hegemon to the idea of an eye?
Yeah, I'll dive into this one first, and then you guys could kind of pick what I say apart. I think one of the most important things, and I'm learning this more and more, is just to block out the noise and focus on what you believe in. That doesn't always work in the short term because the noises are really loud, and you think that the powers that be actually control things, when you realize that if you do your work and you focus on you, there is tremendous agency in building your own network around you, and so then you can become your own elite within your small community. But really, I think that one of the things that we don't realize is that like we can't really judge our moment in our moment, and whomever these elites are might not transcend in the time. And so really, I think that is just like kind of block it out. But then when we see the names, I mean, I'm guilty of it. It's like when I'm professional Rob at museums, I look at who donated the pieces, you know? So it's like, so I have to be conscious of it, but more and more and more, it's like I'd rather build someone up than, you know, when you rely on other people, you find yourself in an environment. I don't know if you're all paying attention, but the art market is in this kind of rough spot, and partly that's to do with people caring about other people, not building up a new generation and encouraging contemporaries to engage.
I mean, is it Pierre Bourdieu? So is it him who invented the concept of cultural capital? Capital, in a way that yeah, right. So I mean, I guess so. You're talking about elitism. So we're talking about like some kind of pyramid, like shaped, kind of like, you know, with like the top, you know, and then the mass. The taste of the masses, and you know, this so but that suggests there, I mean, it's a fact of life, right? That's it's always been like that. Art is linked to money. It's super old. There've been big patrons of arts and all that. So, I mean, I guess before there was a church that was sponsoring also the artist. I mean, it's a long history, right? But it suggests that there's like different levels of cultures, different. So how important is it to me personally? Like, I'm like Rob, when I'm in the studio, I'm lucky to block that out. Like I can. I'm lucky that I don't really have to. I can make what I want for the most part. I mean, there's always constraint, but I can make what I want, and for now, I'm lucky not to have to censor or like try to please. But I mean. How I don't know. I just feel like maybe it does takes a lot of money, right? To have to be able to travel the world and like go to a lot of museums, to dine to very fine restaurants, to have such a range of experiences that you will develop a lot of that cultural capital. And so yeah, sure, it's that in that way it's linked to money. And sure, if you grow up, you know, in one like village, or you know, or you have next to your village is like a let's say a fast food chain. So all you know your life is like McDonald's. You know, that's all you eat. So yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not saying McDonald's doesn't taste good. I think it tastes pretty good. I like going there sometimes. I'm guilty, but yeah, it means you're in context. Your context will be much more narrow, right? You will know maybe one food you want to. All this stuff is relevant for the appreciation of art, for sure. But at the end of the day, it's not. There's many things about the appreciation of art or culture in general, and I think for instance, I like making art that will appeal to to most people. I'm not. For me, it is important, and I also really appreciate pieces of popular culture. So there's a hierarchy, like you say, that exists because of a system we live in, an ecosystem. But I don't think it's necessarily a judgment on the art itself, or the different stratus, the different kind of cultural, different type of art that exist. So yeah, like I think it's great if you can appreciate like really fine food at restaurants and also enjoy McDonald's every once in a while. I just think for the appreciation of arts, there will be context, and elitism will be just what you call elitism. I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about, but it will be just one of the many things that counts. You know, one of the. I don't know. I was just improvising, but like, it's just one of the things, and it does matter, but it's just one of the things. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you figure out how to resolve this tension in your mind over the course of the book?
I think a lot of it. I mean, as sort of, I think Rob and Julie both alluded to, comes with developing our own eye, and I think with our own eye comes our own taste, our own judgment, our own confidence, our own sort of universe of art that is relevant and matters. And I do think one thing I learned from Julie is this idea of not thinking of taste as a destination, but as a journey. I think a lot of us think of taste as an identity. You know, we find something that we like, and we're sort of like, we are a person who likes, I don't know, Taylor Swift, and like we are not to be challenged on it. Like that is who we are. We will take it to the grave. And I think that there's something to be said for being open to letting our tastes evolve and be challenged and change. And I think that there's something, art can play a role in that. And just, I mean, to your point, just going back to the elitism, I mean, I did encounter and was surprised at the extent I encountered what I describe as this strategic snobbery that exists in the art world to keep people out. And I think there are very deliberate mechanisms. And once you see how they work, they become a little less scary. I mean, you know, it's like everything from the art speak to, you know, the sort of vow of silence around prices. I mean, where else can you go? I mean, gallery is a fancy word for art store, right? And it's like you go into these art stores and like, you know, they're not going to tell you the prices. I mean, they will if you ask, but you have to go through some stuff, let me tell you. Denny Dimin did share its prices. I appreciated that. You know, and then they'll like refuse to sell you things even if they're for sale. And I do think that to me, ultimately, you know, I started off from this point of not having art in my life. And I ended at this point convinced that it is a necessity. And I think scientists are right there with artists. There's a biologist who's argued that art is as necessary to us as food or sex. And if you think about it, art is one of our oldest inventions. We invented paint long before the wheel. It's one of our oldest means of expression, right? We were painting and, you know, making art long before we could write. And it's one of our most universal urges. Like we all engage with art, whether we're like prehistoric humans or preschoolers or Parisians, or former Parisians. And, you know, I think that for me, I ultimately came to this place via science and via artists of seeing that art is crucial because it helps us fight the reducing tendencies of our minds. And art can mean a lot of different things. I'm not going to go into the definition of it too much, but like art can be a painting at the Met. Art can be a Super Bowl halftime show. Like I love the way that Julie is able to kind of see art in the everyday. And I think part of that comes from having let art work its magic on you, in the sense that when we look at the world, you know, we do not see things like video cameras, right? We are not accurate, objective, dispassionate observers. We have these filters of expectation that descend, and they preemptively, you know, prioritize, dismiss, sort all the raw data coming in even before we get the full picture. And like I said, artists and scientists argue that part of what art is so important and crucial to the human experience is it helps us yank off those filters of expectation. It's not always pleasant, but it introduces these irresolvable, confounding images that keep our brains nimble and open to new experiences. It introduces a glitch, and it's a glitch that's a gift. And so I ultimately think that there is an artist in each of us, to the extent that we commit to fighting those reducing tendencies of our minds, that we commit to not compressing our experience of the world, but staying open to that chaos, to that beauty, to that nuance. And I think that art is a crucial part of helping us do that.
Okay, so you spoke about challenging tastes, and one of the like irresolvable, confounding images in the book for me, and one of the most fascinating parts of the book, Bianca spends time with a self-proclaimed ass influencer on Instagram, this performing artist named Mandy Allfire. Certainly an irresolvable, confounding image when I went to her Instagram. And it's, you know, Mandy is kind of like engaged in this like explicitly very commercial project of selling her ass on Instagram for fans, like clicking for likes and getting cash money for this, but also maybe a sophisticated critique of male gaze, commercialization. So I guess I want to get into the challenges. And also, we're just using the word art a lot. You just said it could be a Taylor Swift and, you know, Picasso. So, like, help bound this. Like, who is Mandy Allfire? Why is she art or is she not art? And then I guess I want to hear from Rob and Julie, like, where do you guys sit in terms of, like, an Instagram ass influencer and how you would differentiate them from an artist or not?
Yeah.
Include them in the fold.
Well, I'll say quickly, just because I know we're supposed to open up for questions, but from all of you, so start thinking. But so Mandy Allfire, I was initially very skeptical of her work, but we met because she was doing a performance where she was doing a live face sitting, and so she had invited her Instagram fans to come so she could sit on their faces until, and I quote, they couldn't take it anymore. And so the first time I met her, she sat on my face. And that, I was very fascinated by this project and very confounded and wasn't sure whether it was art or whether it was good art. I mean, it was all like very confusing to me. And I think, long story short, I think for me, I think that, when you look at the history of our idea of fine art, it is deeply shaped by these rather arbitrary decisions that were made by status-conscious Europeans in the 1760s who decided there was a limited number of human activities that counted as fine art and the rest was like craft, whatever. And yet, for thousands of years, art was anything involving human ingenuity and skill. And when you look at, scientists and evolutionary biologists and, anthropologists and the way they look at the history of our relationship with humans and art, it really opens up. It becomes these other things, these practices of making special, of kind of repetition. And so, I do think that there is something very kind of personal. It's sort of thinking something is art is sort of a handshake, I think, between the viewer and the creator. I mean, someone puts something down, and it's sort of up to you to pick it up as art or not. I remember there's this quote I love that I'm going to butcher, but they talk about how, like, there's some, also French philosopher or artist who was like, the most incredible artwork in New York City is the Brooklyn Bridge. I sort of love that. Like, yeah, it's up there.
Okay. Julie. Mandy Allfire, you've read the book.
I read the book.
Is she an artist?
So when I saw your question, sorry, and I tried to look for stuff. I couldn't see anything anywhere. Didn't I not look well enough?
At Thug Life Thick Baby.
Ah.
Yeah.
Nope. That's what the piece of the puzzle I was missing to them. Well, so yeah, I didn't find the art. So if I don't see something, I need to see something. It's just in itself, it means nothing. Yeah, it could be art. No, maybe it's not art. I don't know, but I need to see something.
So when Bianca triumphantly came to the gallery after being sat on,
sheepishly, but go ahead.
You were very pridefully wearing your T-shirt, and I quickly dismissed it.
I had a big T-shirt that said I was sat on.
And I quickly dismissed it. But it's one of these things, there's historical precedent for institutional critique with people using sexuality in kind of like direct engagement, like talking like...
like an asshole.
Yeah, like an asshole. So basically, artist intention... historical grounding, it is art. However, it is maybe not something that appeals to my personal taste level. It's not something that maybe should be exhibited at every museum or canonized in, Jansen's history of 21st century art. But I think that it is, it's relevant. She has an MFA. So she...
When in doubt, fall back on credentials. And that may be, I realize I can't see this clock at all, and we are now over time.
Yeah.
So that may be a place to open it up to the rest of us. We have to wrap up. Okay.
Yes, we'll linger, and you can ask this question. Thank you so much.
Thanks.